Welcome to another Disruptive Discourse video. This is episode 9 of what Ark Invest bought this week. As you all know, every weekday Ark Invest releases a list of stocks purchased and sold for their ETFs. And if you didn't know that, but you're interested in seeing that list, then check out episode 1 for how to get access to it. So in this week of December the 7th to December 11, Ark Invest purchased additional shares in 12 stocks that I've previously analyzed. Those purchases are on screen right now, and the videos in which they appear are in the link below, so feel free to check those out if you wish to. Ark Invest also purchased shares in 10 new stocks that I haven't previously analyzed, so as usual I'll give my analysis on those stocks and look at what their future growth potential is. I'll also give my personal view on the stock and whether it is worth buying right now. Now on to the new stock purchases. The first stock is Vertex Pharmaceuticals, ticker symbol NASDAQ VRTX. Ark Invest purchased $18.05 million worth of shares on December 7. The CEO is Reshma Kewalramani. So some of you may have heard of Vertex Pharmaceuticals on this channel. If so, that's because of their link to CRISPR Therapeutics. They are the main sponsors for CRISPR's flagship drug, the CTX001, which is the very first ever human gene editing drug that uses the CRISPR-Cas9 technology. They began that collaboration in October of 2015 and have successfully completed the key stages of research, new drug approval, and it's currently in advanced clinical trials with a wealth of very promising results, with all patients being sickle cell and beta thalassemia free since dosage. Of course, this is not the only collaboration between the two companies. Vertex also had an exclusive license to CRISPR's Duchenne muscular dystrophy drug candidate, and it also has an option to co-develop and co-commercialize CRISPR's myotonic dystrophy drug candidate. And finally, it has a license option with CRISPR for its cystic fibrosis drug candidate. All three are at the research stage of development. The latter of those genetic diseases is in fact Vertex's main area of expertise, and that's cystic fibrosis. This is where Vertex makes its name. Vertex spent the past 20 years in discovering and developing medicines that for the first time treat the underlying cause of cystic fibrosis, and now it's in the process of rolling this out to the world. It is already available commercially in the US and many parts of the EU. And to give some context to how this drug will change the lives of those living with this disease, here's a story of a boy living with the disease. I genuinely couldn't help but share this.
Now that's a question. Cystic fibrosis is, well, a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Nearly 11,000 in the UK. And in the UK, each week, 2 people die from CF and 5 more babies are born with it. Which probably means a lot of you are watching this in search of answers to that big question. So, let's get started. Cystic fibrosis is about genetics. You can't catch it. But if both your parents have the CF gene, there's a 1 in 4 chance you'll be born with the condition. About 1 in 25 people carry the gene, and most don't even know it. And I should say at the start, there's currently no getting rid of it. All sounds a bit gloomy, right? But whilst there's no cure, a lovely life is still possible. Just look at me. You see, I have CF, so I think I'm a good person to tell you a little bit more about it. Cystic fibrosis is caused by a faulty gene that disrupts the movement of salt and water in the body's cells, making the mucus in people with CF thicker and stickier. This sticky mucus causes problems, mainly in the lungs and digestive system, but also affects other parts of the body too. It's not nice. The small airways in the lungs can get clogged up with this mucus, causing infections and, over time, damage to the lungs. So, what does all that mean for everyday life? Well, here are some of the symptoms. Frequent chest infections, severe or prolonged coughs, wheezing or shortness of breath, abnormal bowel movements, difficulty gaining weight, and for most men, infertility. There's also the issue of never being able to meet up with anyone else with CF. Basically, we could make each other unwell because of the bugs and infections that get transmitted between people with the condition. For better or worse, CF is a part of me. It may be an unhealthy relationship, but there are a lot of daily treatments to tackle cystic fibrosis effectively, which can make our union that bit more harmonious. A whole host of antibiotics to fight infections in my lungs. They're not all that colourful, but you get the idea. Physiotherapy to help shift the mucus that builds up around my organs. Enzyme capsules to take with food, they're really not that hard to swallow. And talking of food, we need a special high-fat diet to make sure our bodies get all the nutrients that it needs. And more drugs to thin that sticky mucus. People with CF sometimes need to take over 40 tablets a day. It's a burden for sure, but it's the preferred option. If conventional treatments no longer work, a lung transplant might be needed. Cystic fibrosis presents daily compromises and challenges, but with careful management and the right treatment, people with CF can lead full and happy lives. Work, travel, family, it's all possible. Recent figures suggest that half of people with CF will live past their 47th birthday. But it's also thought that a baby born today with cystic fibrosis could live longer as life expectancy continues to increase with the amazing advances in treatment and care. So, what is cystic fibrosis? It's a serious condition, but one that an army of people out there are very serious about beating for good.
Now, it's definitely good to know that people wouldn't have to resort to taking copious amounts of drugs that wouldn't even address the root cause of their illness. Having said that, the reason for Ark's investment in them may have more to do with the fact that Vertex has its fingers in many of CRISPR Therapeutics' pies, including exclusive licenses in some cases. So this is a smart way to get even more exposure to CRISPR Therapeutics. Now, looking at the company's revenue, you can see that their revenue has been ramping up year over year at a very solid rate of 34.76% compound annual growth rate over the past 3 years, and this is accounted for by the commercialization of their suite of cystic fibrosis drugs. And as they enter new markets such as Asia and Australia, you can expect that revenue to keep ramping up. Then throw in the future revenue from the CRISPR collaborations and you have a company that's generating revenues for years to come. Vertex is definitely a great company, and don't be surprised if a takeover or merger between Vertex and CRISPR Therapeutics takes place at some point in the future. And as for me, I would be happy with that because both are very forward-looking companies. Vertex is a buy for me without question. The next stock is Takeda Pharmaceuticals, ticker symbol NYSETAK. Ark Invest purchased $31.7 million worth of stocks on December 7th to December 11th. The CEO is Christoph Weber. Takeda Pharmaceuticals is a global biopharmaceutical company headquartered in Japan. It focuses on 4 therapeutic areas, namely oncology, rare genetic and hematology, neuroscience, and gastroenterology, and over 80% of its revenue comes from these areas. The company has also recently successfully secured FDA approval for 2 of its drugs, TAK-721 and TAK-003. The former of the 2 drugs will be the first major cure for a rare esophagus disease, and the latter is a vaccine for dengue fever spread by mosquitoes. This company is in a roach category of companies. Basically, it's a huge biopharmaceutical company with a wide range of products. And as you would expect, the company's growth rate is relatively small, given that this is a large size company. Firstly, don't be misled by the chart that you see. The last 3 years are more representative of the company's annual revenue growth, which is $15.33 billion in 2017, $16.69 billion in 2018, and $18.86 billion in 2019, which is a modest 10.92% compound annual growth rate. The large part of the 2020 revenue is made up of one-off sales of its non-core assets totaling 10 deals worth $11.3 billion. It earned a total of $30.56 billion, giving it a much more flattering compound annual growth rate of 25.85%. I believe the fact that the company has divested majority of its non-core assets to focus purely on its innovative pipeline of products is one of the reasons why Ark have shown some interest in the business. I think that the divestment and focus on innovation would prove to be a good business decision by the management. Let's watch this space. It could be a great time to invest in the company. I'm not yet invested, but we'll put this on my watch list for sure. The next stock is Deere & Co., ticker symbol NYSEDE. Ark Invest purchased $6.1 million of the stock on December 7 and 8. The CEO is John May. Deere & Company has been a public company since the early 1970s and specializes in machinery and technologies for the agricultural and construction industries. Over the years, the company has embraced autonomous technology and it is one of the leading companies in autonomous farm machineries. John Deere has also been honored in the robotics category of the 2021 CES Innovation Awards, which recognizes outstanding production design and engineering in consumer technology products. This is the second straight year John Deere has received a CES Innovation Award. The award was for its X-Series combine machineries. Here's the X-Series in action with its full automation technology.
Automatic harvest optimization tools guarantee maximum performance and grain quality, no matter who is sitting in the operator's seat. It starts with the Optimized Performance feature. An interactive menu gives recommendations for settings based on the harvest priorities. These include losses, broken kernels, and grain sample cleanliness, as well as straw quality. Once the settings have been chosen, Combine Advisor takes over. Using cameras in the grain elevator and active tailing system, it automatically makes adjustments to maintain the desired quality of work. No operator input is required. Combine Advisor is linked directly to the automatic speed management system, Harvest Smart. Taking multiple calibration points at different speeds and throughput levels, Harvest Smart lowers the combine's speed if the settings cannot achieve the desired output. If conditions improve, the combine's speed is increased. In this way, it always keeps the X9 running at its maximum capacity.
As you can see, similar to companies like Raven Industries and Trimble, they have all embraced robotics and automation, and they are arguably at the cutting edge of this technology, which is why Ark Invest is really keen on investing in these businesses. As for the revenue, it's seen respectable growth for a large cap mature company. Ignoring the bump in revenue for 2019, its revenue grew from $29.07 billion in 2017 to $35.51 billion in 2020, representing a compound annual growth rate of 6.9% year over year. No doubt another great company, but one which is not really on my radar, except potentially to be included in my dividend portfolio. The next stock is Salesforce, ticker symbol NYSECRM. Ark Invest purchased $23.1 million of the stock on December 7th. The CEO is Mark Benioff. I believe I discussed Salesforce in episode 7, where I explained why I was selling Slack. And for those who are not familiar with the story, Salesforce has reached an agreement to buy out Slack, which was one of my biggest positions until that acquisition. Now, I did well in selling the stock following the announcement of the acquisition because the share price for Slack rose by almost 60% overnight on the news, given that they announced the price at which they would be buying Slack, which in effect was $27 billion. So there has been no incentive for the price to be bid up beyond that $27 billion valuation threshold, which is where it has remained since that announcement. Now, I didn't sell Slack because it had reached its maximum valuation, although I suspect that could have been one of the reasons why Ark Invest has systematically sold down almost all, if not all, of its position in Slack. It now seems that Ark Invest are looking to take up some position in Salesforce. Now, exactly how big a position they will take is yet to be determined, but for now, they clearly want to keep their fingers in that pie. So let's talk a little bit about Salesforce. For those who don't know, Salesforce is a customer relationship management system. It is the interface that businesses of all sizes use when they interact with their customers, from lead generation to sales through to accounting and after-sales services. Salesforce is without question the number one CRM software system to date, with over 25% of the market share, and it is used worldwide, but is by far not the only one. Now, there are indeed synergies between Salesforce and Slack. In fact, there's an article which breaks down all of the CRMs that integrate with Slack, and of all of those CRMs that were reviewed, Salesforce was the standout winner. Although there were others which might be a better fit for small businesses like HubSpot, which offers free CRM to manage lead generation activities whilst also integrating with Slack. So what does this mean for the other top 6 CRMs that integrate with Slack? Will Salesforce use this as a means of edging out those competition and win more market share in CRM? Will Salesforce help Slack grow by introducing Slack to more of the Salesforce CRM customers? These are all questions that are yet to be answered, and this is one of the reasons I am now considering whether to take up a position in Salesforce. Now, when you look at Salesforce revenue and growth, it's actually quite good. It's grown from a revenue of $8.44 billion in 2017 to $17.1 billion in 2020, representing a compound annual growth rate of 26.54% over the past 3 years. In comparison, Slack's compound annual growth rate over the same period was 81.67%. So maybe the apparent synergies between the two companies could result in a higher growth for Salesforce and represent a win-win for both companies. I do hope so, and for that reason I think I will be investing in Salesforce also. The next stock is Peloton, ticker symbol NASDAQ PTON. Ark Invest purchased $46.8 million worth of the stock on December the 7th and December the 8th. The CEO is John Foley. I think it's fair to say that we've all heard of Peloton, and if somehow you haven't, then Peloton is a home fitness experience company that specializes in manufacturing and selling home exercise bikes. They've also very recently launched the exercise treadmill. However, in my view, its unique selling point is the Peloton app. This is where members can access a variety of motivation-filled exercise classes, from Peloton bike rides to running, yoga, stretching, you name it, they've got it. Now, the app is accessible to people even if they don't own their bikes for a fee of £12.99 here in the UK, and that's approximately $17.70 in the US, or it comes free with the bike or treadmill. If you get the equipment, you can either pay outright or pay monthly, and this makes it even more accessible to those who can't afford to pay outright for the equipment. Peloton has built a cult-like following for its brand, but it is no stranger to controversy. This time last year, it released an advert for its bike, and that drew some backlash for its brand. If you weren't aware of this, then it's interesting to watch this review of the ad. I'll leave my comments to myself about the ad and let you make up your mind about what you think of it. Here it is.
Everyone's talking about the Peloton bike brand. Can you explain to us what the controversy is?
So they had an ad, and it pretty much was a holiday ad where this husband gave his wife a Peloton bike.
All right, let's watch that ad really quick.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Now.
A Peloton? Give it up for our first time ride.
All right, first ride. I'm a little nervous, but excited. Let's do this. 5 days in a row. You surprised? I am. 6 a.m. Yay.
Rising with the sun.
That was totally worth it.
Let's go Bryson Boston, 50 rides.
She just said my name. A year ago, I didn't realize how much this would change me. Thank you.
This holiday, give the gift of Peloton.
So what's wrong with that?
I just don't understand, how is this offensive? And there's a lot of backlash. And people are saying, well, you know what, Peloton is only for rich people. The way that they put out this advertisement is so sexist. On and on and on. And of course, the internet is going to hate me for saying this. But I feel like we're a little hypersensitive these days. You know, it's just an advertisement with a woman who's exercising. Her husband got it for her. There's no word, no even thought or dramatization of her being on a diet or her needing to lose weight. So the internet is just blowing this out of proportion. And the funny thing is, their stocks actually stumbled.
Wow.
Yeah, so it has that much of an effect, but they'll be the last ones laughing because now we're all talking about it.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, to your point, it just happens to be that it's a thin person in that commercial who just stays thin but is using that bike. And the bikes are $2,000 plus, so I think people get a little sensitive about things that are so super expensive, but it just might not be for you. And that's
it's just
fine.
the wrong audience. If you're mad about it, you probably can't afford it, you know? I mean, listen, these advertisements are just, there's something that everyone's nitpicking. And, you know, with all these movements, we're just really, really sensitive and blowing it all out of proportion.
Now, when you look back to that time last year, the stock was sitting at around $29.99 per share, and today it has risen to $161.50 per share, which is a staggering 530% increase year to date. Now, what is impressive is that they are building upon that success. demand is very high for their product and they can't sell enough of these bikes. And so in order to scale up their supply to match their ever-growing demand, they've bought out Precor, another exercise bike manufacturing company. Ark Invest certainly thinks this was a good move, going by the tweet from Ark's very own analyst, Nicholas Grouse. When you take a look at the company's revenue, the story is very much the same. In 2017, its revenue was $218.6 million, and by the end of this year, 2020, the revenue has grown to $1.83 billion, making it an outstanding compound annual growth rate of 103% every year for the past 3 years. We also know that they can't seem to make these bikes fast enough to catch up with the demand. So with this fast growth that doesn't seem to be letting up, you can bet that they've got more growth to come. I'm actually very impressed by the company. Its execution is reminiscent of, dare I say, Elon Musk himself. I'm tempted to invest. Let me know what your thoughts are. The next stock is New Technologies, ticker symbol NASDAQ NIU. Ark Invest purchased $2.4 million of the stock on the 9th of December. The CEO is Yan Li. You have to hand it to Ark Invest for digging out these amazing gems. After researching New Technologies, I was infected with utter love for their products, faster than a new strain of infectious CV-19 virus. The company makes e-scooters that are reminiscent of the iconic Vespa scooters, but arguably much more visually appealing, and of course it's electric. Let's take a quick look at their product just to show you exactly what I mean.
What is the M Plus? It's a scooter reimagined and purpose-built for the city. It's quick, it's fun, and it's built for two. Because cities are for sharing. It all starts with its next-generation battery. Compact, lightweight, and packed with power. And our proprietary BMS technology adds another layer of safety. 50 kilometers, 80 kilometers, 90 kilometers? No, more than 100 kilometers on a single charge. You can fast charge in just 3.5 hours. And the design? The judges have spoken. With 4 color options, we've got something for you. And eye-catching from every angle. At New, we don't just design beautiful products. You need to pay attention to the details. You need to experience our technology. The M Plus is smart and connected. 15 sensors collecting 200 points of data every minute. Anti-theft, GPS, riding habits, and battery status all sent directly to your app. You define how you want to ride. Toggle up to sport mode or toggle to cruise control on open roads. Regenerative front and rear disc brakes. FOC controller, and much more. A quick quiz, a lightweight body, plus a Bosch motor, plus front and rear disc brakes, plus an advanced FOC controller. What do you get? An incredibly agile riding experience. More fun, more secure, more free. This is the all-new M Plus. New. Unlock your city.
One of the biggest advantages the company has is its price point. These scooters are extremely cheap. The batteries are also portable and can simply be taken out and charged at home with a regular wall charger. Its batteries are made by Panasonic, which is the same company that Elon Musk partnered with for its first battery cells for Tesla, and the electric motors are made by Bosch. So the product oozes quality and class. I literally want one right now. Its revenue has grown from $354.81 million in 2016 to $2.08 billion in 2019, which is a compound annual growth rate of 80.31% each year for the past 3 years. When we then consider the total addressable market for this company, it's literally huge. It's absolutely eating up the Chinese scooter market right now, and it's expected that the potential addressable market revenue from this sector could grow to almost $42 billion by 2030. New technology is clearly poised to benefit extremely well in this category, and I can only see this company growing for years to come. Needless to say, I'm extremely bullish on this company, and straight away I'll be investing in this one. This could be a potential 10x stock. Who knows? But one thing's for sure, I'll be investing in this one for the long term. The next stock is Base Inc., ticker symbol OTCPK BAINF. Ark Invest purchased $6.8 million of the stock on the 10th of December. The CEO is Yuta Tsuruoka. The best way to describe Base Inc. is that it's the Japanese version of Shopify, but it caters for even smaller online businesses, such as the solo entrepreneurs and the mamas and papas shops in Japan. The company went public last year and has certainly benefited from the stay-at-home phenomena brought on by the pandemic. Here's a short Bloomberg quick take which breaks down the company very well.
A 30-year-old intern turned multi-millionaire. Yuta Tsuruoka is the CEO of Base Inc., now worth almost $2 billion. He developed software to help individuals and small businesses create internet shops.
I believe there will be more online shops run by individuals. The number of shops and merchandise volume will grow into something unimaginable right now. Looking 10 to 20 years ahead, I think we're entering a new e-commerce age where individuals will run their own online shops and rely less on large-size internet portal sites. I hope to grow this service into something that will be able to serve users globally over time.
To tell us more is Bloomberg reporter Minjun Lee in Tokyo. MJ, what is his company exactly and how did he get started?
Right. He started this company very young. Like you said, he was just an intern when he got the idea. I was triggered by a comment made by his mom, who runs a women's clothing shop in a rural area of Japan. And she wanted an online shop, but like many people of her age don't know to, she didn't know how. And so Tsuruoka got the idea that he wants to help people like his mom, basically, with no internet knowledge. So he decided to create a tool that makes it a lot easier for anyone to create an online shop, basically. He also put in payment tools. So if you sign up for it, you don't have to worry about creating a separate payment tool. So if you use this base tool for creating your online shop, it also comes with necessary payment systems. So it's just like a one-stop shop for creating an online shop.
It kind of sounds similar to Shopify. What's unique about Base that made it so successful?
Yeah, one of the biggest differences is Base Inc. has a huge focus on small retail owners, like a one-man shop or maybe 2 to 4 people, whereas Shopify, we know it to be a huge internet giant, which has a lot of big retail giants. And the understanding is that Yuta Tsuruoka will continue to focus on these very small retail owners where Japan has an abundance of.
And it seems like it's a pretty tough time for many businesses. How is Base doing during the pandemic? Is it getting new customers amid the COVID-19 outbreak?
So Base Inc. went public last year. He didn't time it for the pandemic. This pandemic really triggered a lot of Japanese retailers to rethink their businesses, and even those who didn't really think about going online for the time being rethought their business strategies. So they were kind of pushed into online shops, and Base happened to be there. And Yuta Tsuruoka said a lot of retail companies actually decided to go online, and they saw a huge demand for their Base tools during the pandemic. So there was a surge in demand during the months of like April and May, where like demand more than doubled, and growth has kind of peaked now as we're kind of seeing less spread of the virus. But he said he continues to see relatively strong demand in the short term.
As for its revenue, it made 3.85 billion Japanese yen, which is equivalent to $35.29 million. The year before that, their revenue was $20.97 million, making it a compound annual growth rate of 68.29% over that year. If you had the opportunity to invest at the start of Shopify's IPO, wouldn't you do it? Well, arguably, here's another opportunity to do the exact same thing. I'll keep an eye on this company for sure. The one thing to watch out for is that this is an ADR. I've covered what those are in a previous video, but for those who want to know what they are, then feel free to pause the video and the explanation is right there on the screen. The next stock is Thermo Fisher Scientific, ticker symbol NYSETMO. Ark Invest purchased $27.8 million worth of the stock on December the 10th, and the CEO is Mark Casper. This is a global biopharmaceutical company that makes various types of medical instruments, equipment, and kits for its life sciences, analytics, and specialty diagnostic segments. The company has been publicly trading on the New York Stock Exchange market as far back as the 1980s, but more recently the company has seen growth, especially with regards to its diagnostic segment, mainly because it is one of the leading providers of testing kits for the pandemic. Here's a short video which shows the significance of their testing kits capabilities.
In early March 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. As more and more people became ill and economies began to shut down, clinicians and scientists started working together to find answers. It became vitally important to develop a diagnostic test, which is precisely what the scientists at Thermo Fisher Scientific did in record time. Our real-time PCR test, which diagnoses the virus in less than 3 hours, was authorized by the United States FDA for emergency use and later received the CE mark in Europe. The Applied Biosystems TaqPath COVID-19 test kit is now available in nearly 180 countries. Why was this kit so rapidly adopted for use around the globe? Because regulatory bodies throughout the world know what we all know, that to combat the pandemic, we need accurate, proven, gold standard technology. We need to work on a global scale. We need scientists to accelerate innovation with urgency. And that's why Thermo Fisher Scientific is leading the world in COVID-19 testing. Our scale and depth of capabilities have never been more vital. And our mission to enable our customers to make the world healthier, cleaner, and safer has never been more important than it is today.
As I said, this is a huge company that's been around for a long time. So in terms of its revenue, it's generated a massive $25 billion last year alone. So I wouldn't be expecting to see any doubling of its revenue anytime soon, although you would expect that the pandemic might see a little moving of the needle in terms of its revenue for next year. Having said that, its revenue grew from $18.27 billion in 2016 to $25.54 billion in 2019, representing a compound annual growth rate of 11.81%, which is very respectable for a large cap company indeed. It pays a dividend, so if you were looking for a dividend paying stock with a bit of growth, then you couldn't go wrong with this stock. The next stock is Surrepta Therapeutics, ticker symbol NASDAQ SRPT. Ark Invest purchased $29 million of a stock on December 10th to 11th. The CEO is Doug Ingram. Surrepta Therapeutics is another biotech company that has its main focus on the discovery and development of gene therapies and RNA-targeted therapeutics. The main area of disease that it's focused on is Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It already has 2 drugs which are on the market, and it's in the process of developing a gene therapy version which looks very promising in making a big impact towards curing the disease. Just for the sake of clarity, there is a significant difference between gene therapy, which is what Surrepta is doing, and gene editing, which is what CRISPR Therapeutics and Vertex, which I reviewed earlier in this video, do. Gene therapy is basically gene transfer therapy. It's transferring a healthy gene into the patient, whereas gene editing actually edits the patient's own gene to fix the faulty gene by cutting off the faulty part of the gene. That's a very crude explanation, but I hope you get the point. Here's the CEO who gives a bit more insight into their product.
So, of course, the program that people are looking at so closely with you is your gene therapy for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which could just be transformative for this devastating disease. Tell us about the timelines from an investor standpoint, when you see this as being de-risked, and for a patient standpoint, when this could potentially get on the market.
Well, I'd say in one sense, every day we're de-risking along the way, and we still have a lot to do at the same time. Just to remind us, so we have a gene therapy for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It relates to this disease that results in a lack of a protein called dystrophin, which is a shock absorber in the muscles. And we're trying to literally insert into the muscles of these children a significantly truncated but still functional version of that same structural protein to try to keep them alive and keep them healthy. We had a really fascinating and very significantly impressive data on first 4 children, both in 2018 and 2019. We started a study we call Study 102, which is this placebo-controlled trial. We've just completed the dosing of all of the children in that trial. That's about 41 children in that trial. We're going to start another trial, if all goes well, by around the middle of this year. And we could be in a position, if we are successful, to have a readout on those studies and apply for an approval in the U.S. and then hopefully around the world in 2021 or so.
And you are not the only company working in this space. Actually, in the next hour, we're going to have the CEO of Pfizer joining us, and they're also working on gene therapy for DMD. How do you compete with a behemoth like that?
Well, a couple things. First of all, we really are, immodestly, the experts in the natural history and the understanding of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So I do believe we can do a very good job serving the community, and we've done that already. We have 2 therapies right now treating patients who have Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I think it's a very positive signal when we see companies like Pfizer taking an interest in trying to advance therapies that might treat Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's one of the things that ought to give parents and patients a lot of hope that we're going to find solutions for them. With that said, we are razor focused on our therapies and on our approach, and we're very excited about the results we've seen to date, and we're going to stay essentially head down executing, getting our therapy out to those patients if it works as soon as possible.
And you've already got 2 drugs on the market for this disease, which, not as transformational as the gene therapy in your pipeline. But you have to do a confirmatory study of your first drug because you got conditional approval for it from the FDA. And some folks have said the timelines are more delayed than expected. When can we see that readout?
Well, so that readout will probably occur somewhere in the 2023-2024 range. We do have a confirmatory trial for Exondys ongoing right now. Essentially, it's looking at our current therapy, Exondys, at 30 milligrams per kilogram versus a much higher dose of the same therapy to see which of those doses would be more beneficial to patients, and we're aggressively pursuing that. That's Exondys. That treats about 13% of children with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We received an approval in December of last year for a therapy called Vyondys. That treats about another 8% of children with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and we're already serving the community with Vyondys now. And then we've just started a rolling submission, and our goal is to get an approval as soon as possible, hopefully this year, for what's called casimersen, another 8% of children with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So if we are successful by the end of this year, we could be in a place where we've more than doubled the number of patients who are benefiting from our Morpholino technology, this so-called PMO that we have.
In terms of its revenue, this is relatively low in comparison to its market cap, as it currently has a price-to-sales ratio of 27. However, its revenue growth has been ramping up significantly at a compound annual growth rate of 312.65%, which I suspect is down to its commercialization of its DMD drug. To give this some context, it is not unusual for a biotech company to witness explosive growth in revenue when transitioning from being non-revenue generating to revenue generating once they get the green lights to commercialize a drug. And this is what has happened here with Surrepta. It is also spending huge on R&D, which is a very positive sign indeed. As for me, it is not a stock I'll be investing in because I think fundamentally CRISPR Therapeutics gene editing will be the future, and so I'm backing that rather than gene therapy. The next up is Codex's, ticker symbol NASDAQ CDXS. Ark Invest purchased $2.7 million of a stock on December 11th. The CEO is John Nichols. Codex is another biotech company that has recently formed a very interesting partnership with a biotech startup company called Molecular Assemblies. The reason for that partnership is to help develop a new way of creating synthetic DNA. Now, those of you who follow the channel will know full well that I'm a very big fan of Twist Biosciences. Twist Biosciences has made its name and fame in the synthetic DNA field. It was the company to make the first synthetic version of the pandemic virus. It has also successfully used synthetic DNA for data storage, a huge market in the future, and there are many, many more opportunities out there for synthetic DNA. So needless to say, this is a huge field to master. Now, it's being argued that the process that Twist uses is a traditional method that has been in use for as far back as the 1980s, and it's called phosphoramidite synthesis. Some have argued that phosphoramidite synthesis process has its limitations, one of which they argue is that it cannot do long sequences because the efficiency of direct synthesis steadily drops off beyond 200 base pairs of synthesized DNA, so it would be time consuming to make a whole genome using short synthesized DNA, which is what they argue to be the limitation with traditional phosphoramidite synthesis. So there are 3 privately owned startups that have begun pursuing a novel route to replace the traditional method, and the new approach is called enzymatic DNA synthesis. Enter Molecular Assemblies, alongside 2 other companies called DNA Script and Nuclera. All 3 companies independently are in a race to find a solution for DNA synthesis using an enzyme called TDT. They are by no means there yet, but the hope is that this will be a superior method of making synthetic DNA. This is why Codex has invested in one of the 3 private companies called Molecular Assemblies. Codex has the option to buy a 10% stake in Molecular Assemblies depending on how positive things progress. As for now, Codex has invested $1 million into Molecular Assemblies. Codex itself is no slouch. The company makes high-performance enzymes. Now, for those who don't know, TDT is by definition an enzyme, so Codex could potentially be assisting Molecular Assemblies with the production of those TDTs that they require for their investigation of this new enzymatic DNA synthesis. Very interesting indeed, and certainly this is one story to keep an eye on. I wouldn't be surprised to see a complete buyout of Molecular Assemblies if they are successful with the enzymatic DNA synthesis. As for future growth, as I said, most of the catalyst for growth is likely to come from this joint venture between 2 companies, so I personally wouldn't be paying too much attention to the company's current revenue and past growth rate, but for the sake of completeness, its revenue grew from $48.84 million in 2016 to $68.46 million in 2019, which is a compound annual growth rate of 11.91%. Any company that's at the cutting edge of advancements in science and technology gets my attention, and I think these guys are generally onto something here, and for that reason I'm going to stick my finger into that pie. Perhaps maybe it'll be more of a toe dipping. Anyway, this is a space to keep an eye out for, as the next big news could see all manner of crazy things happen to the share price. And now for my final thoughts. I've covered some really interesting companies in today's video. 4 of them have grown their revenues at a rate of over 60% year over year for the past 3 years, and 3 more companies could see an explosion in their share price at some point in the future, and those 7 companies altogether are Peloton, New Technologies, Base Inc., Takeda Pharmaceuticals, Codex, Salesforce, Vertex Pharmaceuticals. But out of those 7 companies, 2 of them, in my view, have true 10x potential, and they are New Technologies and Base Inc. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then do like, comment and subscribe. Once again, a big thank you to all of my subscribers. Thank you for continuing to support this channel, and this really does spur me on to bring this content to you. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.